Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso. I'd like to give a big thanks to Zager Watches in Sydney, Australia for lending in the watch we're going to be looking at today, and that is the Panerai Luminor GMT in steel and titanium on a bracelet, the PAM161. Panerai's history reaches as far back as 1860, and the first Luminors arrived in the 50s, but it wasn't until 1993 when the first Panerais would be sold to the public, and that started with the Luminor, featuring the signature crown guard that's become synonymous with the brand. 10 years later, Panerai gave us the PAM161, a two-tone titanium and steel dive watch with a GMT movement housed in what's known as the Bettarini case, named after Panerai's chief mechanical designer in the early 90s, Alessandro Bettarini. The steel finished in high polish provides a stark contrast to the darker, muted satin-finished titanium, highlighting the curves of the Italian design as well as the Luminor crown guard inspired links of this rare example of a Panerai bracelet. The dial is pure Panerai. Big, luminous numerals, high contrast and easy to read, and with the long 24-hour hand circling the dial pointing at the 24-hour counters around the edge of the dial. Panerais are known for standing out in the crowd, but its unique bracelet design and two-tone construction make it stand out even amongst other Panerais. At 44mm wide and 16.6mm tall, with a thick, solid bracelet, you'd be surprised how light this watch feels. The blend of titanium and steel means that on the wrist it feels about as light as a full, steel-cased Luminor on a leather strap. In the early 2000s, a small Panerai wasn't an option, and it hardly is today, but at 44mm this is pure Panerai. Plenty of size and presence, but the proportions of the case help it avoid looking oversized. The 1950s inspired design is so classic you could even use it as a dress watch with the right strap for anything short of black tie. But that bracelet is what makes it really stand out on its own as much as on the wrist. The links are well spaced and allow for plenty of flexibility, with plenty of full and half links for resizing, with screws of course. The twin trigger deploying is secure, but opens up easily enough once you get the hang of it. And it reveals a beautifully milled set of swing arms that are the first of many hints at how well built this watch is. And the clasp even has a curve so that it fits snugly on the wrist once it's on. Behind that titanium caseback, you won't find the traditional ETA 2893 that you'd expect from most brands using outsourced movements. Instead, Panerai opted to have a Valjoux 7750 stripped of its chronograph and then fitted with a 24-hour hand. However, like the 2893, it's the 24-hour hand that jumps independently and with a conventional quick-set date, as opposed to the jumping 12-hour hand and date as found on the Rolex GMT Master 2 or the Patek Philippe Travel Time. The 42-hour power reserve can be wound through daily use or via the crown behind the iconic Luminor crown guard. The crown guard itself is much more than an aesthetic touch though. The logic behind this is that firstly it provides a clear indication on whether the crown has been properly sealed or not, and secondly it prevents against the eventual wear of seals and screw threads by opting for compression instead of screwing down in order to provide this Luminor with 300 meters of water resistance. As a product of Italian design, it goes without saying that Panerais are good looking, but the attention to detail on the 161 takes this Luminor to another level. The inverted cyclops isn't a regular feature on most present-day Luminors, but on this example in particular, its axis of distortion combined with the jet black dial evokes the murky depths of the ocean whenever you look at the date. The differential finish helps bring out the most of the two-tone concept, with the darker satin-finished titanium creating a negative space to help the watch look more streamlined despite its bulky dimensions. From the lugs onwards though is when the GMT really gets into its stride. Firstly, the bracelet fixture is held in by screws and evokes much more luxurious models such as the AP Royal Oak Offshore versus the spring bars found on other watches at this price point. The bracelet links not only use polished steel to evoke the shape of the Luminor crown, but they also give the bracelet an organic quality that isn't found on most bracelets sporting more traditional straight lines like the Oyster. The design of this has more in common with a Patek Philippe sculpture than any other sort of design that you might find on a metal bracelet. And if the sculpture is the Patek steel sports watch that will always stand out in a room full of Nautilus and Aquanauts, then the Luminor GMT 161 on the steel and titanium bracelet is without a doubt a Panerai to stand out in a room full of Radomirs and Luminors. Even more so when you realize there were only 500 of these in existence. So that's my impressions on the Luminor GMT. And it was great experiencing this watch because this was the first Panerai that I could really look in depth Panerai is normally a brand I sort of shy away from purely because, as you've probably seen from the videos in this, I don't really have the wrists for a Panerai. They're a little bit too big for my wrists and for my taste, but I've always liked them because they have such a cool and distinct design. You can spot a Panerai from a mile away, and of course, you know, it's Italian design, it's gonna look good. But what really surprised me was how comfortable this watch was. But we'll talk more about that in the 3 positives and negatives. And the first positive I have to highlight about this specific Luminor GMT is that it's a unique way of two-tone. Like when I reviewed the Grand Seiko SBGC 223, I love the idea of reinventing two-tone. The idea of going beyond just your standard steel and gold. In this case, it's steel and titanium. And they've also differentially finished the steel and titanium in that it's satin, titanium, and polished steel. It really creates a unique effect, but more importantly, this gigantic watch actually feels quite light. To give you an idea, it felt about as light as just a normal steel Luminor on a strap. The second thing I have to highlight about this specific watch is the bracelet. I love the attention to detail and the fact that the links, they're shaped to mimic the shape of the crown guard. The fact that they have that differential finish, it's so light, but when you open it up, it's so robust. You look at the whole thing, it all feels so solid. And something that happens a lot when you have titanium watches is that it feels kind of flimsy because it's so light. It's not actually true. Titanium is extremely strong, but it feels sort of flimsy because of that. But by having the steel, that plus how thick some of the metal is, it all just feels like such a high quality piece. And the look of it is totally distinctive. You know, it's completely different to what you'd expect from Rolex, for example, with an oyster bracelet. This is a bracelet that you will only find on a Luminor, only find on a Panerai, and I think it's great, and it's a great way to stand out. Panerais are already distinctive as they are, but this is the Panerai no one else will have, so definitely something to highlight for this watch. And then the last thing I want to highlight about this watch is its versatility. Panerais, despite being big, you put them on a leather strap because of their classical design, you know, you can still get away with it as a dress watch. Of course, no cuff is ever going to get over it, but it's still, you can get away with it. And part of the experience of having a Panerai is switching it around. So the fact that you have the option to put it on the strap is obviously a big plus in versatility, but also the fact that it's so light, you can wear it every day, it's automatic, it has a GMT, which is probably one of the most useful functions you can have, especially if you travel. It has the whole package, 300-meter water resistance, you never have to worry about it getting wet. It's a robust movement based on the Valjoux 7750, so you know it's going to be strong as well. There's really very little to go wrong with this watch. It's something you can wear every day for every occasion, and that's something that I really, really value. So definitely a big highlight of this watch, and if it was a little bit smaller, I would honestly recommend this and want this as my own only watch. However, despite the fact that this is a great watch, it still has its shortcomings. Size is probably a less objective shortcoming, but it is something I have to point out. This is a big watch, 44 millimeters diameter plus the crown guard, 16 millimeters thickness. If you're not into big watches, or if you're like me, you don't really have the wrists to pull them off, then this watch probably won't be for you because it is so big. In addition to that, the bracelet does have protruding solid end links, so that adds even more size to the watch. So if you're not one for big watches, this probably isn't going to be a watch for you, and that'll put off the majority of the people who aren't into this watch. Is just the fact that it is too big for them. The second disadvantage is on more of a technical level, and that's that it isn't a true GMT. Much like my Steinhardt here, what it does is it has a moving GMT hand instead of a jumping hour hand. So a jumping hour hand you would find on something like an Omega Planet Ocean GMT, of course a Rolex GMT Master. What that allows is it means that your local time, the time where you are right now, is controlled by the main hour hand. You can scroll through the date using it, and you can jump forward and back an hour whenever you land without having to hack the movement. You do that with the main hour hand. Whereas with this, with an ETA 2893 like what I've got in here, you move the GMT hand and it has a standard quick set date. The disadvantage more than anything is that if you're traveling, for example, you don't want to be reading your watch as a GMT because it goes around 24 hours. So that hour hand is going to be a different place to what you expect. You want your reference time to be tied to that. So you still want your normal time to be easily legible. So that's a bit of a disadvantage. It's a small one, but it is still one to consider, and from a practical standpoint, it is annoying that you'd have to change that instead of your regular hour hand. And then the last disadvantage, and this is specific to it being a Panerai, and that's that there's no display case back. This is a watch from 2003 to 2010, and Panerai is probably one of the most copied watches after Rolex. And that's obviously because of the fact that their design is quite simple for the most part, especially on the dials. And also for most of their history, they've been using outsourced movements, so it's easy to copy those. By not having a display case back, that's one way less that you can check if your watch is real. Obviously, if you have access to, you just take it to a watchmaker, have them open it up, or if you're buying from a reputed seller, you don't need to worry about that. But it is still that little thing that'll add a little bit more doubt, a little bit more effort to your search, and that may be a disadvantage, the fact that you can't just look and see what's going on in there. And this is also something to highlight because for a watch of this time, when Panerais were still being highly copied because they were also extremely popular, it would have been a good way to provide a little bit more security and assurance for people buying them. But in any case, most of these negatives are small. If you can get past the size, chances are you will love this watch because its positives definitely do outweigh it. And more importantly, this watch offers a great amount of value. The beauty of a watch being hot a few years ago and now not so much is that they depreciate and makes them a lot more accessible. Like I said before, this is a watch that has 300-meter water resistance, a GMT, it's automatic, it's steel and titanium, so it's comfortable. You can get away with it as a dress watch, and it's extremely robust and with a movement that's going to be easy to service. And you can buy one, a watch that used to be $10,500 US when it was new, you can buy one for as little as 4,000 US up to about 8,000, 8,500. So you're getting a lot of watch for the money. To put that in perspective, if you wanted the equivalent Luminor GMT new from Panerai right now, you'd be spending around $7,500 US for the current PAM00161 Luminor GMT that uses the calibre OPVIII or XXXI if you're reading the Roman numerals. And that essentially is just an evolved version of the calibre that you find in this PAM161. You put that in perspective, it's really good value. And then if you want to go the next step up to another brand that features sort of big watches and get it in a GMT form, something like an Hublot Big Bang GMT, you're looking at nearly 20,000 US new. So this represents amazing value as a pre-owned buy. If you can get one from a reputable seller so you know it's not fake, it has all its box and papers, you have it verified, you have a killer watch, a unique watch, and one that not everyone is gonna have. Unfortunately for me, of course, it's too big for my wrist, but I have tried on some Luminor Marinas in the 42 range, and they are quite tempting. So I think I'd love it if Panerai could maybe reinvent this watch, do it in a 42, but still do the steel and titanium, have this cool bracelet on it. I think they'd have a winner, and definitely they'd have my interest for sure. But in any case, let me know in the comments what you think. What do you think of this example versus its current contemporaries? What do you think of Panerai in general? Are you a fan, or is the styling and the sizing something that puts you off? I'd love to know in the comments below. And of course, thanks again to Zager Watches in Sydney, Australia for providing me with this watch. Make sure you check out their links in the description below. And if you like this video, please do like it and share it. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see all the pictures from this video as well as the infographics. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Valjoux if you haven't already so that you can keep seeing new watch videos. But in any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.